It began with a whisper, a quiet observation buried inside the stone walls of an elite royal preparatory academy. Princess Charlotte, just 10 years old, was about to uncover a secret that would rattle the corridors of inherited privilege and disrupt the unspoken codes of upper crust schooling. But what Charlotte did next would ignite a storm that pulled the House of Windsor directly into the heart of scandal and virtue, where betrayal and integrity collided behind velvet curtains. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. From the moment she stepped into those cloistered hallways, Charlotte understood she was entering a world built on polished reputations and carefully curated legacies, a school where aristocratic expectations carried more weight than textbooks, and where every child walked with the awareness of the surname stitched invisibly onto their uniform. She was admired for her politeness, yet constantly observed as though every step she took was a preview of the monarch she might one day become. And in that watchfulness she learned the quiet art of paying attention to the things others dismissed. That skill sharpened the moment a mock examination was placed before her, and she noticed, with an instinct that seemed far beyond her years, a pattern so subtle it would have slipped past even the most seasoned educator. It began with a glance, barely a flicker, between two boys seated on opposite sides of the classroom. A look that didn't match the innocent panic usually found in rooms full of students facing timed exams. Charlotte felt it like a jolt, her internal alarm sounding before she even understood why. She leaned deeper into her chair, pretending to focus on her paper, while her eyes traced the small, calculated gestures around her. A pencil tapped twice on a desk, a sleeve pulled just high enough to reveal a tiny ink mark, a page flipped not to check an answer but to signal that a code had been received. It wasn't malice that drove her to study them. It was the same instinctive sense of justice Catherine had nurtured in her since childhood. The belief that doing the right thing mattered not because of who you were, but because of who you chose to be when no one was watching. And the more she observed, the clearer the emerging picture became. This was not one boy cheating, nor two students sharing answers, but something bigger, something organized, something rooted in entitlement that had gone unchecked for far too long. At the center of the behavior was a boy she recognized immediately, well-spoken, impeccably groomed, the son of a powerful political family whose influence stretched far beyond school corridors. He carried himself with the casual confidence of someone who had never been told no, a child raised on the assurance that consequences were optional for people like them. Charlotte watched him distribute the tiniest of signals with the precision of someone who had practiced these movements for months. She felt the weight of an invisible line forming before her, one separating silence from courage, comfort from confrontation, and deep within her, in the place where royal children learn early that legacy is not forged by titles alone, she understood she was witnessing a violation of something far greater than school rules. She didn't know yet how far the truth would reach, or how deeply it would challenge everything expected of her, only that she could no longer pretend she hadn't seen what she saw. Because when a princess notices injustice, she cannot simply be a child, she becomes the quiet force preparing to challenge an entire system built on secrets. What Charlotte unearthed next wasn't just a case of academic dishonesty, it was a microcosm of everything she was being groomed to fight against. As she watched quietly from the edges of the classroom, Princess Charlotte began noticing the signs, hidden symbols, on wristbands, a shared notebook passed only between 5 boys, and then whispers of passwords and a tablet hidden behind a false drawer. What had started as gut instinct evolved into something darker, a coordinated cheating ring operating beneath the institution's gilded reputation. The whispers that once lingered in her mind now took shape as a shadowy network woven through the upper echelons of British privilege. These weren't just mischievous students cutting corners, they were the sons of ministers, ambassadors, media magnates. Each carried the weight of a family legacy that demanded perfection, and in their pursuit of it, they'd built a quiet empire of deceit. Charlotte found herself in the presence of something engineered, not improvised. Bluetooth devices sewn into cuffs, micropencils scribbled with code, earpieces masked as hearing aids. Their operation was seamless because it was shielded by assumption no one ever suspects the polished, the powerful, or the well-connected. What disturbed Charlotte most wasn't their method, but how effortlessly they manipulated the system around them. Teachers, overworked or strategically indifferent, missed the signs or chose not to look deeper. It became clear to Charlotte that these boys weren't just exploiting the cracks, they were trained to find them, to widen them, and to slip through unnoticed. She saw them for what they truly were, untouchables masquerading as overachievers. Her observations intensified, but so did the weight pressing down on her chest. To speak up would be to wage war not just on students, but on dynasties. And she, a royal child under constant scrutiny, would be accused of undermining the harmony that institutions like this were built to protect. Still, silence had its own price. Her closest friend, a sharp, quiet girl from a respected military family, slipped her a note one morning that read simply, "This goes deeper than you think." Charlotte felt the chill of that. Warning settled deep in her spine. She had known this wouldn't be simple, but now she understood it could become dangerous. These boys weren't just cheaters, they were symbols of what entitlement allowed and what silence permitted. And above all else, the one thought that kept clawing at her resolve was what would happen if her name became tied to it all. If the tabloids spun a narrative of a royal informant. If her father's image, carefully cultivated through years of duty and diplomacy, was dragged into the mud for a truth she couldn't ignore. But fear couldn't compete with conviction. Charlotte carried the burden alone, knowing exposure would mean isolation. She didn't confide in her teachers, or even in her mother. Instead, she documented. And she waited. But the game changed entirely when she unzipped her satchel that Friday afternoon and discovered a sealed exam paper already filled out, already marked with answers. It wasn't hers, but someone wanted it to look like it was. But the day Charlotte found the tampered exam paper in her own satchel, the battle was no longer optional. It was personal. A Friday afternoon. A bag search. A planted answer sheet stuffed between Charlotte's math revision pages. Gasps echoed in the hallway. The intention was clear: frame the royal, divert suspicion. But they underestimated her resolve. This wasn't just about cheating anymore. It was about silencing the one girl brave enough to disrupt their quiet corruption. As the invigilator lifted the forged exam sheet into the air, time seemed to fracture. Teachers exchanged stunned glances. A few students covered their mouths in mock horror. Others didn't even pretend. The damage was swift, deliberate, and far-reaching. By the time Charlotte was ushered into the headmaster's study, the whispers had already taken root. Of course they'll protect her. The princess won't get expelled. She probably had the answers herself, but Charlotte didn't cry. She didn't beg. She stood silent, spine straight, and eyes focused not with arrogance, but with the calm of someone who knew she was being tested far beyond her years. The headmaster, a man groomed to navigate elite politics more than pedagogy, tried to mask his skepticism behind practiced neutrality. But Charlotte could read adults better than most. She sensed his unease, knew he was calculating the royal implications. He expected her to deny. He expected emotion. But Charlotte shattered both assumptions. With unwavering composure, she asked not to be excused, but to have a formal inquiry opened. She wanted every satchel searched, every surveillance tape reviewed, every invigilator questioned. Her demand wasn't just bold, it was explosive. It stripped away the privilege she was accused of hiding behind and placed her faith squarely in the system they all feared would fail her. For the first time, doubt began to bloom in the headmaster's mind. Could the princess really be telling the truth? And if so, what did that mean for the rest of them? Later that evening, a folded piece of paper was slipped into Charlotte's locker. No name, no handwriting she recognized, just a brief, chilling sentence. You were never supposed to see it. Not only had she been framed, but there were others watching, others aware, maybe even complicit. Her instincts screamed to tell someone, but she trusted only one voice in the world at that moment, her mother's. That night, as Catherine sat beside her in the drawing room, Charlotte broke her silence. She described everything, the gestures, the tablet, the coded wristbands, the suspicious friend who'd suddenly stopped speaking to her. Catherine didn't interrupt. She didn't offer immediate comfort. She just listened, fiercely and fully. When Charlotte was finished, there was no lecture, no platitudes, just one quiet reply. "Then we'll face it. Together." And in that, the moment, Charlotte realized that strength wasn't always about confrontation. Sometimes, it was about who stood beside you when the storm came crashing in. But when the headmaster calls an emergency meeting with Prince William, the royal stakes explode far beyond school walls. When Prince William entered the headmaster's office, it wasn't as the future king, it was as a father. The weight of Charlotte's integrity was now a matter of royal principle. Would he protect her at all costs, or demand accountability regardless of blood? The headmaster expected a passive royal reaction. What he received was something altogether more decisive. William's jaw was tight, his eyes scanning the stack of carefully assembled reports with the trained precision of a man who had faced war rooms, crises, and press onslaughts, but none of that compared to the quiet storm building inside him now. The headmaster launched into protocol and presentation, describing the discovered exam paper and the ongoing inquiry. But William wasn't interested in surface narratives. He flipped through the documents, pausing, questioning inconsistencies with surgical accuracy. Why was Charlotte's locker the only one not previously searched? Why did the answer sheet appear only after she demanded an investigation? Why had no CCTV been reviewed before conclusions were drawn? He wasn't there to shield his daughter from responsibility, he was there to ensure justice hadn't been manipulated to target her. The headmaster's confidence wavered as William picked apart the case with both legal precision and paternal instinct. Charlotte wasn't perfect, William knew that, but she had something that couldn't be faked: moral clarity. So when the school suggested she may have acted to cover her own involvement, William requested a private moment with his daughter. In that room, the tension broke. Charlotte didn't cry or plead. She simply spoke, recounting the timeline, the coded behaviors she'd noticed. And the moment she realized she had become the target, William listened not as a royal, but as a man who had walked alongside his mother, seen injustice play out under royal silence, and vowed never to repeat history. He believed her not because she was his daughter, but because her truth was coherent, steady, and unshaken by fear. Later, back at home, it was Catherine who looked him in the eyes and said, "You know she's telling the truth. Now prove it." With that clarity, William returned to the school not as a father, but as an investigator. He requested access to surveillance footage, something the school had neglected to fully review. The footage didn't just vindicate Charlotte. It revealed a crack in the entire foundation. A staff member, seen entering the locker corridor minutes before the planted paper was discovered. A flash of something in his hand, a glance exchanged with one of the accused boys. And just like that, the case tilted. This wasn't a schoolyard betrayal, it was a conspiracy bolstered by adult complicity. William didn't explode, he didn't grandstand. He simply turned to the headmaster and said, "Fix it, or I will." The atmosphere shifted. The staff were no longer in control. The royal family wasn't retreating into silence, it was advancing with purpose. But just as the circle began to tighten, one unexpected voice emerged from within the cheating ring, ready to betray them all. The confession came at night. A boy, shaking, barely holding his tears, requested to speak to the headmaster. "It wasn't her," he said. "They threatened me too." What followed was a list of names, tactics, and the horrifying truth of how deep the scheme ran, including threats of expulsion, exile from social circles, and parental punishment. And Charlotte? She had been right all along. In that dim office, lined with medals and certificates, the trembling voice of a frightened child detonated a truth that could no longer be buried, beneath uniforms and bloodlines. He named the 5 boys, described how the network operated, coordinated via hidden group chats, bolstered by private tutors hired under the guise of legitimate support, and protected by a rotating cast of invigilators too loyal or too scared to report what they saw. Some teachers, the boy said, knew. Not all. But enough. Enough to keep the wheel turning. Enough to protect the privileged and punish those who resisted. His voice cracked when he mentioned the boy who refused to participate. The same boy who once sat beside Charlotte. His exclusion had been swift and merciless, targeted bullying, academic sabotage, and silence from staff who claimed not to see. The weight of the revelation settled heavily over the headmaster's shoulders. Not only had Charlotte not cheated, she had risked everything to expose a disease that had festered under his leadership. Her presence had forced a mirror in front of an institution too polished to self-reflect. And now, the reflection was grotesque. The boy's statement, recorded and sealed, left no room for doubt. Charlotte was innocent. But more than that, she was right. The very thing they tried to destroy her for had become her vindication. The headmaster, pale and visibly shaken, drafted a letter that night. Not an apology, but a commendation. Addressed to Prince William, it spoke not just of Charlotte's courage, but of her restraint, her wisdom, her refusal to weaponize her surname. She had chosen truth when it would have been easier to remain silent. She had acted like a leader, like a future queen. And yet, in the silence of that office, the headmaster knew the cost of what was coming. The revelation didn't just threaten boys, it threatened bloodlines, donors, power, politics. It risked unraveling an entire web of influence that had kept the school untouchable for decades. As dawn crept in, the letter was sealed with a red ribbon, stamped with the school's crest, and placed in a locked drawer for delivery. But before it ever reached Kensington Palace, the headmaster received a call not from a parent, not from a politician, but from the Royal Communications Office. Their tone wasn't angry. It was measured, strategic. A voice, calm and rehearsed, uttered a phrase that sent a chill down his spine. This needs to be handled carefully for everyone's sake. But before the commendation could reach Kensington Palace, the Royal Communications Office intervened with a chilling warning. Charlotte's act of integrity posed a dilemma far beyond academics. It raised questions of institutional accountability, privilege, and royal visibility. A PR storm loomed. The palace's inner team debated, should the matter be quietly resolved or publicly acknowledged as a triumph of character? For a monarchy fighting for relevance, the decision would shape public perception of the next generation. Within the walls of Kensington Palace, tension brewed behind closed doors. Senior advisors, veterans of scandal management and media deflection, warned of the risks aligning the palace with controversy, even on the right side of it, could fracture the fragile bond between the royals and the elite educational circles they'd quietly endorsed for generations. Their argument was simple. Don't turn this into a spectacle. But William's private office didn't share that view. His aides, many of them younger and less bound to the traditions of silence, urged him to lean into it, celebrate Charlotte's courage, draw a line between inherited privilege and earned morality. For the first time in years, the palace faced a generational fracture, not over power, but over principle. The conversation shifted sharply the moment Catherine entered the room. She didn't speak as the Princess of Wales. She spoke as Diana's daughter-in-law. Calm, precise, and unflinching, she turned to William and said, "This is what Diana would have wanted. Charlotte didn't just protect truth. She stood alone for it. Don't let the world silence that." Her words hung in the air, cutting through protocol and hesitation. Still, William knew the risks. The moment they embraced this publicly, the press would swarm. They wouldn't just protect Charlotte, they'd dissect her. Already, a photo had leaked William entering the school gates, head low, face unreadable. Tabloids speculated on expulsion, privilege, royal meddling. And beneath all of that noise, Charlotte remained unaware of the brewing storm. She thought it was over. She believed the truth had won. Late into the night, William sat at his desk and drafted a statement. It was powerful, honest. It spoke of integrity, courage, and the unspoken burdens carried by children born into legacy. He read it aloud to Catherine. She nodded, but when the moment came to release it, his hand stopped short. Something in him hesitated, not out of doubt in Charlotte, but in the world's capacity to receive her truth without twisting it into something political. He turned off the lamp, closed the statement, and chose silence for now. But as the palace braced for impact, the headmaster took matters into his own hands with a speech that stunned the entire school. In front of the entire student body, the headmaster took the stage. What he said next was not rehearsed, not approved by the palace, and not filtered by PR teams. It was raw, unapologetic, and echoing through history. Integrity still matters. And today, a princess reminded us all of that. Charlotte sat frozen. Then came the applause, and then the silence of stunned aristocrats. The assembly had been called without notice. Parents were invited at dawn. Students were ushered in without explanation. The tension in the hall was suffocating. Whispers died the moment the headmaster walked out, holding only a single sheet of paper. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was about to say. He didn't name names. He didn't point fingers. But every syllable was a scalpel, cutting clean through the infection that had poisoned the school's reputation and stitching together a new precedent that even privilege could not outrun. He spoke of courage, of honor, of what it means to do the right thing when it is the hardest possible path. He spoke of a student who chose truth over comfort, who endured suspicion, manipulation, and betrayal without seeking revenge. Though he never uttered the word princess, the implication thundered through every corner of that hall. It was a tribute, a quiet coronation of character. The applause began slowly. A few teachers, then a wave of students, and then silence. Not out of disapproval, but because the aristocracy present didn't know how to respond. The system they had long benefited from had just been called out by one of their own. For some, it was an outrage. For others, a quiet, unspoken awakening. Parents began whispering in corners. Some were furious, vowing to pull their children from a school that humiliated legacy. Others sat stunned, perhaps even proud, knowing their own children had just witnessed a moment of moral leadership that textbooks could never teach. But the biggest shift was among the students themselves. A new social current began to move. The untouchables weren't as untouchable anymore. The codes, the smirks, the invisible hierarchies all began to crumble beneath the weight of one girl's refusal to stay silent. And Charlotte felt it. Not celebration, not vindication. Just change. Her peers began to look at her with a new kind of respect and a quiet distance. Reverence, perhaps. But also caution. Because once you reveal the cracks in the walls, you're never just a classmate again. Days later, the headmaster's letter to Prince William was quietly made public. With William's permission, it was released to the press. It was short, direct, and devastatingly powerful. He praised Charlotte's poise, her maturity, and her unwavering commitment to truth. The nation read it. The world reacted. And yet, Charlotte said nothing. She went to class. She did her homework. She walked the same halls that had once turned against her, but she walked them differently now. Not with arrogance, but with something far more dangerous to those who relied on silence, conviction. But the final twist came days later, when a sealed letter was delivered to Charlotte's room, bearing a gold emblem not seen in decades. A letter sealed with gold, tucked beneath Charlotte's pillow by a trusted royal aide. It bore no signature, only the initials D.S.W. Inside, a handwritten note. Courage, even in silence, creates legacies louder than crowns. No one in the palace would confirm its origins, but those who knew Diana's handwriting recognized the calligraphy. Charlotte clutched it for hours. Her fingers traced the embossed emblem again and again, the wax seal imprinted with a forgotten royal crest once, used only on private correspondence. The initials lingered like a ghost. D. S. W. Diana Spencer Windsor. She didn't ask who sent it. She didn't need to. The words within that note carried a resonance far beyond their length, and the moment she read them, something shifted inside her. It wasn't just affirmation, it was a passing of something sacred, something unspoken, a legacy whispered through ink and instinct. When she showed the note to her mother, Catherine didn't cry. She didn't question. She simply stared for a long moment, then pressed the letter gently back into Charlotte's hand and whispered, "She would be proud." That night, Charlotte found William sitting alone in his study, surrounded by silence. She offered the letter without a word, and as he read it, his composure cracked. The man who had carried the weight of duty since childhood now sat with tears in his eyes, not from sadness, but from a powerful, aching recognition. The past had found its way back, not with fanfare, but with quiet timing and poetic precision. In that room, through the silence, Diana had spoken. The outside world, always hungry for speculation, began to swirl. Reports leaked, rumors ignited. Royal watchers debated the handwriting, the phrasing, the origins. Was it a decades-old note rediscovered? A message held back for the right moment? Or something even more intimate, something planned by those closest to Diana's memory to guide the girl walking the path she never finished? But amid the frenzy, the palace remained silent. No confirmation, no denial. And that silence said everything. Charlotte folded the note with care and placed it in a small wooden box beside her school badge. It wasn't for display. It wasn't for proof. It was a reminder that truth matters, that silence can be brave, that even the smallest acts of integrity can echo through generations. And as she closed the box, her eyes didn't dwell on the past, they looked forward. But even with the past echoing in her heart, Charlotte's future was about to change once more. She never asked for attention. She didn't seek the spotlight. Yet through a single act of truth, Princess Charlotte emerged not as a symbol of privilege, but of principle. In quiet corridors and behind closed palace doors, discussions began to shift. Not about George, not about succession, but about Charlotte, the girl with courage enough to challenge a kingdom of silence. When she returned to school, there were no grand entrances, no security details flanking her sides, just the sound of her shoes on the polished floor and a silence that had once felt hostile, now transformed into something uncertain, maybe even respectful. She carried herself with the same grace, but her presence had changed. She was no longer simply a royal child in a classroom. She was a story that had pierced through tradition and reshaped the atmosphere around her without ever demanding a word. Behind the scenes, the impact spread further than anyone anticipated. Personal letters arrived at Kensington Palace, sealed and hand-delivered, one from the Prime Minister, applauding her quiet strength and moral clarity, another from a former education minister, stating that her actions had sparked internal reviews of academic integrity across the country. Foreign royals, discreet yet intrigued, sent quiet inquiries asking not about future titles or pageantry, but about character, about whether this girl, in her earliest years of royalty, had already become a symbol of something the crown had long struggled to embody. Earned respect. Within the palace, aides and advisors began calling her by a new name, not officially, not publicly, but in the whisper chambers of royal routine, the resolute one. It stuck, not because it was bestowed, but because it was earned. Catherine watched her daughter more closely now, not with fear but with a maternal intuition that something was beginning to shift, something bigger than a scandal, deeper than applause. She started gently, preparing Charlotte in subtle ways for a different kind of future. A future where the world might not just see her as the younger sibling of a king in waiting, but as a royal voice in her own right. Meanwhile, William stood slightly further back, observing as both father and heir, realizing that Charlotte's legacy might grow in unexpected directions, and that perhaps this was the beginning of a second era Diana had once dared to imagine. The monarchy didn't need louder voices, it needed bolder truths. Late one evening, Charlotte opened her diary. No tears, no emotions spilled across the pages, just a single sentence, neatly written, as if spoken from a place far older than her 10 years. If they feared truth, maybe it was worth telling. And in that sentence, history gained a footnote, a reminder that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes, It sits silently in a classroom, sees injustice, and simply refuses to look away. Because, sometimes, revolutions don't begin with speeches or swords, but with a 10-year-old girl who simply refuses to look away. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.